In Diablo 4, Lord of Hatred, every class sells you a different kind of power fantasy, but once you actually step into Sanctuary, things get messy fast. One minute you're feeling unstoppable, the next you're staring at a screen full of demons, cooldown timers, buffs, and wondering if your build needs a spreadsheet just to function. Some classes feel smooth right out of the gate, almost like they're doing the leveling for you, while others take a bit more patience before they start paying off in a big way. And that's exactly where things get interesting. Whether you're talking Druids, Rogues, Necromancers, or the rest of the roster, each class plays completely differently when you look at leveling speed, endgame performance, survivability, and how well they handle solo content. In this tier list, we're breaking all of that down so you can see which classes truly dominate Lord of Hatred, and which ones might make you work a little harder before you start deleting demons in style. I'm quickly moving on to the video, and I'm ranking classes in Diablo 4 Lord of Hatred. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching.
My friends, only 0.1% of viewers subscribe. If you like this type of content, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you in advance for your support.
The classes in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Barbarian. Walking through Sanctuary with a Barbarian in Diablo 4, Lord of Hatred feels a bit like showing up to a knife fight with a hammer the size of a small car. You are not subtle, you are not fast, but you absolutely make an entrance. What changed things for this class recently is the reworked skill tree, which removed a lot of the old frustrations like critical chance or overpower proc requirements holding basic abilities hostage. Even better, several of those must-have legendary aspects were folded directly into skill upgrades, which means you are no longer forced into extreme gear hunting just to make your build function. You actually get to experiment instead of just praying for drops. In the early game though, Barbarians still feel like they are jogging through mud compared to Sorcerers or Rogues who are basically teleporting across the screen. Leveling is slower, and you do not have much in the way of range comfort tools, so every fight is up close and personal whether you like it or not. But that is where the arsenal system quietly does its work, letting you switch and customize weapons in a way that makes each hit feel heavy and intentional. And the funny part is, once you hit endgame, all that slow starter energy flips completely. The Barbarian suddenly goes from struggling to catch up to deleting entire packs in one swing and shrugging off damage that would erase other classes. And then you get to the fun part, the builds that make you question whether Blizzard tested physics at all. Ancestral Leap turns you into a jumping demolition site, basically rewriting the terrain with every landing. Brawl Rend leans into raw aggression, stacking brutal bleeding damage while you stay glued to enemies like a nightmare they cannot wake up from. Ancestral Hammer of the Ancients is the classic screenbreaker, where one swing feels like it should come with a warning label for everyone else in the room. And if you want pure chaos, Mighty Throw combined with Iron Maelstrom turns you into a walking artillery platform, chaining massive weapon attacks that feel less like combat and more like controlled disaster. The classes in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Spiritborn, Druid, and Warlock. If there is one thing Diablo 4 Lord of Hatred makes very clear, it is that A-tier classes are not almost top tier. They are the ones that constantly flirt with greatness, but have one or two design quirks holding them back. And the Spiritborn is probably the best example of that feeling, because on paper, it looks like it can do everything. The Spiritborn class thrives on flexibility through Spirit Guardian combinations, letting you pivot between mobility, tankiness, elemental damage, or heavy crowd control depending on what the situation demands. It is basically a modular playstyle system disguised as a class, which sounds amazing until you realize that your performance can swing wildly depending on how well your setup clicks. At its best, Spiritborn feels like a highly agile hybrid that moves almost like a rogue, darting through enemies and repositioning constantly. But unlike Rogue, it does not always have that smooth early game power curve or convenience baked in, which makes progression feel a bit more gear dependent than you would expect from something this flexible. The class was a standout in the previous expansion, and it still performs well in Lord of Hatred, but there is this lingering sense that it did not fully benefit from the wave of new skill updates other classes received. It is still strong, just not the obvious pick this and dominate option it once felt like. Druid sits in a very different space, but oddly enough lands in the same tier because of similar consistency issues early on. It is a powerhouse class once it gets going, with shape-shifting mechanics, strong area damage, and solid sustain that make it incredibly reliable in longer fights. The big change for Druids now is the flexibility in form casting, which lets you use abilities in ways that were not possible before. You can cast nature or werebear skills while in werewolf form, which opens up some surprisingly creative hybrid builds that were not really viable in earlier versions of the game. That said, early progression can still feel a bit slow, and resource management remains something you constantly have to think about. It is not a class that just explodes into power immediately, it builds momentum over time, and that makes it feel slightly less comfortable compared to the top tier options. Warlock, on the other hand, brings a completely different kind of energy to the A-tier conversation. It is a strategic caster built around demon-based abilities, combo setups, and controlling the battlefield rather than just deleting enemies instantly. What makes Warlock so fun is how rewarding it becomes once you understand its rhythm. At first, it can feel a bit overwhelming because of resource management and positioning demands, but once it clicks, it turns into a very expressive and powerful playstyle that can handle even the hardest content. The downside is durability. Warlocks are extremely fragile compared to most other classes, even more glass cannon than sorcerers in many situations, because they lack strong defensive aspect options to fall back on when things go wrong. Still, if you accept that risk and play clean, the payoff is huge. Builds like Abyssal Rampage, Apocalypse, Abyssal Hellfire, and Dreadclaws show just how explosive and chaotic the class can become when everything lines up properly. The classes in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Sorcerer, Rogue, Necromancer, and Paladin. When you look at S-tier classes in Diablo 4 Lord of Hatred, the difference is not just power, it is how effortlessly that power shows up in actual gameplay. And the Sorcerer is a perfect example of that kind of I press buttons and the screen disappears design, but with just enough control to still feel intentional. The Sorcerer is a strong elemental damage dealer with built-in crowd control tools that let you freeze, burn, or stun entire packs of enemies while staying surprisingly safe. Barriers, mobility skills, and ranged pressure all combine into a kit that is easy to learn but still has depth when you push into harder content. What really pushed the Sorcerer into S tier in Lord of Hatred is how much smoother the class feels after the skill and itemization rework. A lot of the old complexity has been trimmed away, especially around enchantments, which now feel far more impactful and less restrictive. It is still not the absolute fastest leveling class, but it is consistent from start to endgame. In Season 13, lightning-focused builds in particular stand out as some of the strongest options available, with Chain Lightning and Ball Lightning leading the charge. Even outside of Lightning, builds like Blizzard and Meteor still hold up extremely well, so you are never really forced into a single direction. Survivability also becomes a non-issue once you properly use Teleport and Flame Shield. Instead of constantly reacting to danger, you are usually the one controlling the pace of fights, repositioning instantly and resetting bad situations before they become problems. The Rogue, on the other hand, represents a completely different kind of S-tier power. This is a class defined by speed, fluidity, and constant motion, and in Lord of Hatred it somehow managed to become even smoother after the latest skill changes. Out of all classes, Rogue arguably feels the most complete in both leveling and endgame content. The changes to Cutthroat and Marksman playstyles made the class feel more unified, and the rework to imbuements turning them into duration-based buffs instead of limited charges opened up a lot of creative builds. Playing Rogue is basically controlled chaos. You are dashing through packs, weaving between melee and ranged attacks, and layering traps and explosives while everything around you falls apart. It is fast, responsive, and extremely satisfying in a way few other classes can match. Endgame builds like Penetrating Shot, Death Trap, Rapid Fire, and Dance of Knives highlight just how flexible the class really is. Whether you want precision damage or screen-wide destruction, Rogue has a version of it that feels both efficient and fun without sacrificing speed. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.